Hi, I'm Femi. Okay. Can we chat? Well, not for very much longer if the US government's got anything to do with it. The hugely popular Chinese app WeChat has been deemed a national security alongside TikTok. And President Trump says he wants it banned by September. On today's stream, we dig into what's behind that proposed ban, and we would love to hear from you on YouTube. You can jump into the conversation, and you too can be in the stream. I am looking forward to hearing from these guests. I will say hello to the guests. The guests will introduce themselves to you. Hello, Kingling. Tell everybody who you are.
Hi, my name is Kinling Lo, and I'm a reporter for the South China Morning Post. I'm based in Hong Kong, and I cover Chinese foreign policies and China-US relations. I'm also a host for the SCMP podcast, Inside China, which runs on China's hot topics every week.
Good to have you. Yachu, welcome back to the stream. Remind our guests and our audience who you are. Go ahead, Yachu.
Hi, I'm Yache Wang. I'm a China researcher for Human Rights Watch. I write and research about human rights issues in China. I'm based in New York.
Good to have you. Hello, Times. What does our audience need to know about you? Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Times Wang. I'm a writer and lawyer based in Virginia, and I'm working on a series of lawsuits against WeChat on behalf of US WeChat users.
Good to have you. Nice to see you, all of you guests. If you're on YouTube, you can jump into the conversation right away. But let's start first of all with WeChat, what it does, why people use it. We asked some of our online community to explain it, and this is what they told us.
People's life in China is controlled by WeChat. That's like the single most important communication tools they have. They even play games on it. So if you want to message them or know anything about them, you have to get on WeChat.
Now, the reason why I use WeChat, and probably also the same reason as to what I use the app most for, is to really keep in touch with my family in China.
It is the most popular social media app and the easiest way to stay connected with them since Facebook and Instagram are banned in China.
I use it for work and school too. In group chats, you won't miss out on any important updates. Very useful. I use mini shops and the WeChat wallet to transfer money or just to shop.
It's one of the few apps that are available in both China and the US. And we essentially use this app to build our own Chinese community in the US or all around the world.
That's a pretty comprehensive description of what WeChat is, how people use it. Full disclosure, guests, hands up. Who has WeChat on one of their phones? The lawyer who's prosecuting WeChat does not have WeChat on his phone. All right, that makes sense.
Surprise.
He's first. No surprise. Maybe he knows something that you two other guests do not know. Kingling, first of all, the impact of a ban in the US of WeChat. What might that do? Who may be impacted? Can you explain?
So U.S. President Donald Trump launched an executive order on August the 6th, saying that WeChat, here I quote from the executive order, collects data that threatens to allow the Chinese Communist Party to access to Americans' personal and proprietary information. And U.S. government also quoted that WeChat launches disinformation campaigns and censors content on the platform, and therefore there is the ban that Trump announced. And as to how exactly Trump is going to ban the app from operating in the US, for example, is largely unknown. In the executive order, it was worded rather vaguely that any transactions that is related to WeChat by any person or any property that is within the US jurisdiction, also with the mother company of WeChat, Tencent, will be banned. And a period of 45 days is given until the order comes into effect. That will be September the 20th.
Yachi, you have got WeChat on your phone. Why do you use it? And what impact will it have when you can no longer have it on your phone as an app?
Well, I have two phones. So one has WeChat and the other doesn't, because I don't use WeChat in terms of security. But I have to use WeChat because that's part of my job, and also my entire family are in China. I have to read what's going on, the news from WeChat, because I research in human rights issues. So people post about what they see and what they hear with regard to the Chinese the government's human rights violations. On the other hand, as I said, my family's in China, so I contact my family and friends through WeChat. But as I said, I don't trust its security, so I have a phone specific for WeChat.
What exactly do you not trust about security, Yachi?
First of all, it's well known that WeChat censors, also WeChat surveils. So I don't know to what extent WeChat can extract information from my phone just by virtually having the app on my phone. So I wanted to make sure that WeChat is isolated for the rest of other things I do with my phone.
Mm-hmm. Times. Come into the conversation here. I want to share this with you on YouTube as well. Shaquille says, Trump just wants to highlight the media against China in order to persuade the Americans to vote for him. Is this a political move, or is there something nefarious about what WeChat does if it's an app on your phone? Times.
So I think the real problem is not WeChat or any particular app. It's the Great Firewall that makes apps like WeChat an issue, and it's in fact the one-way nature of the Great Firewall. So information can obviously exit China, propaganda, information friendly to the Chinese government, but even if we're sitting here in the US using WeChat and we want to discuss topics that are critical of the Chinese government, sitting here in Virginia, New York, DC, we would be unable to do that over WeChat. And so to me, this is why I wrote the piece in the Washington Post. I think targeting WeChat misses the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm. And the reason we couldn't discuss whatever we wanted over WeChat is because the app has a sensor on it. So if there are words that might pop up in an algorithm, for instance, those words can be censored. So you could send a message to your friend saying, hey, those protests in Hong Kong, what's happening about them? Here's some pictures, here's some information. That message may not ever get to your friend. Your friend will never know that that message has been censored or interrupted in any way. Kingling, tell us a little bit more about that.
Right. Apart from WeChat, basically all Chinese social media platforms, including websites that are allowed in the Chinese internet, are subjected to a strict law by the Chinese government that essentially censors out all content that are deemed politically sensitive or deemed as accusations or criticisms against the central government on its internet. So I believe this is part of the bigger picture of what WeChat subjected to.
Yachi, I have to share this with you because you have WeChat on your phone. So Leslie Wheeler is watching right now. Hello, Leslie. I love your comment. Wow, WeChat sounds amazing. It does so much. It almost feels like it can totally run your life from your phone. So if it is in fact banned from the US, what do people who use it in the US, what do they lose?
Well, it's very interesting because, I work with human rights activists and lawyers, writers in China. A lot of them can't use WeChat. Why? Because in order to have a WeChat account, you have to register your ID and all that stuff. And the government has control over that. And those people, they don't like the government. And government has been, harassing and censoring them. So they even can't get a WeChat account because the government doesn't want them. So they have developed or find alternatives to chat with each other and to also to chat with me. Signal is not banned in China, so you can right now still use it. And people still use WhatsApp by having a VPN. It's cumbersome, it's a headache, but you can still do it. This has been proved by many people who don't have WeChat and who don't use WeChat because the government doesn't like them or because they wanted to speak freely and without the surveillance by the government. So you can still do it.
Yeah, so you can still, there are workarounds. Here's President Trump in August in a press conference where the press is talking about, well, this app, it does a lot of stuff. Are you not concerned that it will impact Americans who are using it? And this is how he reacted. Let's take a listen.
There's a lot of alarm among American companies about your order on WeChat, Apple, Ford, Disney. They're worried because it's such a big communications platform and a payment platform in China that if you ban U.S. businesses from working with them, that they won't be able to sell, iPhones into China or similar markets.
Whatever.
So you don't mind if
Got
this.
to do what's good in terms of the security of our country. We've been very badly let down by China. What's your next question?
Times, what do you make of that reaction from President Trump? It was basically a whatever.
Well, so my problem with the idea of some kind of ban, which could only really be done by prohibiting Americans from using WeChat, is that it would almost certainly be a violation of the First Amendment. People, the First Amendment protects the right to speak in favor of the Chinese government if you want, and I know that there are already lawyers here in the Chinese community who are planning to sue the administration over the ban. And as much as I have misgivings about WeChat, I think they probably have a very strong argument that banning it would be unconstitutional.
We're getting a sense from the YouTube commentary here that there is a back and forth about China, what China does, and what America does. So THICC, thank you for your thoughts here. China did the same thing to other foreign companies, so it is fairer for the US to ban Chinese apps. Qinling, do you want to run with that one?
I think an important context in understanding WeChat's rise to popularity inside of China and also among Chinese diaspora overseas is that the Chinese government in the past few years has essentially banned most of Western developed social media platforms, including Facebook, WhatsApp. And therefore, as mentioned by some of the interviewees at the beginning of the show, this has become the only channel or one of the few channels that has allowed Chinese people within the country and those who have business in China or those who have families in China to stay in touch. And basically that is an important context that we should keep in mind.
Yachi, let me play this comment from the Secretary of State for the US, Mike Pompeo, talking about why he feels WeChat should not be available in the US. Let's have a listen.
We want to see untrusted Chinese apps removed from US app stores. President Trump has mentioned impending action on TikTok, and for good reason. With parent companies based in China, apps like TikTok, WeChat, and others are significant threats to personal data of American citizens, not to mention tools for CCP content censorship.
Yachi, go ahead.
No, not disregard, the First Amendment concerns with arising from banning WeChat, but I kind of agree with, Pompeo's concern in terms of security. Of course, the Trump administration has other ulterior political motives in terms of, taking on WeChat and TikTok. But in terms of surveillance and censorship, it's, I would say, a lot of Chinese immigrants, particularly the first generation Chinese immigrants in the US, they are often exclusively using WeChat to talk to each other. Even they live in the US, some of them are US citizens. So to a large extent, what they say in the US, what they do are transparent to the Chinese government. What the Chinese government can do, can utilize, exploit that kind of information for their own purposes. This is a concern that is, true.
Times, tell
So
us
if
about
I may,
the case. Yeah, go ahead, Times, please, go ahead.
I wholeheartedly share the security concerns. I agree WeChat and the one-way nature of the Great Firewall, which frankly I think is more accurately described as a great reality distortion filter, are real. The threats are real. The threats to democratic values and to national security even are real, especially because I think the effect of this kind of siloed information ecosystem is to make support for the Communist Party and support for authoritarianism generally higher than it otherwise would be. But that said, we live in an open society. We live in a society that has the First Amendment, and there are costs to sticking with those principles. And one of them is that we need to find other ways of dealing with threats like WeChat than just banning them. And in a forthcoming piece in Foreign Policy, my co-author and I on the Washington Post piece will be laying out a series of policies that we think are more constitutionally sound and more will be strategically more effective than a simple ban.
I want to just drop in here to YouTube again. This is Septinus. Hi, Septinus. Thanks for your comment. The US is on decline. It is scared of China's technological progress. It is foolishly trying to ban all Chinese tech because it wants to keep its supremacy. Kinling.
So I have been covering China-US relations, and the tension between US and China has gone way beyond just US banning the two apps. Some researchers call it an all-front tension, where US and China have clashes over human rights issues, military issues in conflict areas such as the South China Sea, and also on trade. And we are seeing this ban on WeChat and TikTok, actually, which has come in a pairing executive order on August the 6th when the ban on WeChat was launched. These bans on Chinese mobile apps sometimes is deemed as a new front in a US-China trade war, where in the past 2 years, we have seen the two countries raising on, for example, chip making technology and also 5G network development. And these all fall into a bigger picture of deteriorating US-China relations. So the viewer's observation perhaps is addressing to this bigger tension that we are seeing around the world.
And only this week, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs spoke about the upcoming TikTok ban and WeChat ban, and this is how they characterized it. Let's have a listen.
Some US politicians made a murderous attack on Chinese apps like TikTok and WeChat and Chinese companies like Huawei. The root cause is that they harbor hostility towards anything related to China and are attempting to impose ideological labels on Chinese companies. These people are hunting TikTok and other Chinese companies under the guise of national security and are full of lies and slander, which are in essence bullying and looting.
So times we see this as a larger issue between the US and China in terms of their current relations. But if we focus back in on apps on our phone, and the WeChat app on our phone, is it not doing pretty much the same thing that any app that we put on our phone does? And there's a whole list of things that we are going to do this, and you say, yes, accept. You haven't even read the small print, and it's doing all sorts of things and maybe selling your data, etc., etc. Is WeChat just not the Chinese version of everything else that we use on different apps from around the world anyway?
Well, the key there is that the root cause, I would say, in response to the comments from the gentleman that you just quoted, the root cause is really the party state in China. That is the root cause of these tensions, because with Facebook, yes, we give up a lot of our data to companies like Facebook, Google, and Apple. But here, in open societies, there's a firewall between the state and society. And so we have a Fourth Amendment. Other countries have similar laws. And, there is a barrier between what the government can do with respect to private companies. But in the Communist Party system, in the party state, there is no barrier. So that is what makes Tencent, WeChat, TikTok different.
Yachi, I want to share this
I agree.
tweet
I
with
think,
you. Yeah, go ahead, Yachi, go ahead.
I think it's a false equivalence. And yes, Facebook, collects our data, but they collect our data because mostly they want to make money. They want to sell us a table of clothes. So that is different in terms of how the, WeChat, by extension, the Chinese government, the purpose of they collect data. I mean, what people Chinese users use WeChat, and what they say, even in private chat groups, have rendered them into being jailed because they speak critically of the Chinese government. So I think it's a false equivalence in terms of how different companies they all collect the data. There's a difference between Facebook and WeChat.
Looking at the bigger picture, we have Cindy Yu, and she's a broadcast editor at The Spectator. She spoke to us a little bit earlier on the stream. Let's have a listen.
By trying to ban TikTok and WeChat, Trump is ramping up the tech decoupling from China. Companies that are in the firing line are no longer telecoms giants, which may have a close relation to the state and also are in key infrastructural sectors. Now they're social media companies. So what does this mean for the future of Western freedom when it comes to technology? Well, it takes them one step closer to China by banning apps. And it also leaves Chinese entrepreneurs to wonder, even if they have little relationship to the Chinese state, what is the future for them in the West?
Kinling, that's such an interesting point. If you are devising and making apps and you're thinking about this is the app, this will be very cool for people to use. People have already remarked on how comprehensive WeChat is and what it can do. Will this stop entrepreneurs from pushing the envelope for actually doing some amazing technological work?
Right. I think it's a very interesting point to note because the current US-China relations, which resulted in bans like this on WeChat, is actually raising a lot of uncertainties for not only app developers, but also for tech companies like big multinational companies, for example, Apple, which basically the industry experts have been raising the possibility of this WeChat ban potentially harming their business because Apple is a US company but relies a lot on Chinese production line inside mainland China and also has a lot of Chinese users of iPhones. And so the uncertainty of what such tension between US China on tech and on mobile apps will bring to US companies is one very concerning questions for these companies. And also, as you said, for app developers, this uncertainty following President Trump's basically targeting at Chinese apps and Chinese telecoms giants give them uncertainty as to what audience they should target on and how big their business or investment should go.
Some questions and some concerns on YouTube. Let me just sum them up. When China bans US apps like Facebook, it's not a problem, but when the US bans Chinese ones, it's a problem. I suspect that is coming from the American contingent on YouTube. Thank you for those thoughts. Yachi, go ahead.
Well, I think Chinese government bans Facebook is a problem. As a writer on human rights issues, I've been criticizing that for sure. But that does, Chinese government bans Facebook and other international platforms doesn't necessarily mean that it's okay for the U.S. government to ban them because as Times has mentioned that there's First Amendment concerns. There are values that the U.S. Should uphold. Regardless of the cost.
Just very briefly, Times. Sometimes what President Trump says doesn't actually happen. But do you expect WeChat and TikTok to be banned, to be gone out of US apps, availability for US apps by September?
I don't. First of all, I mean, the executive order itself says that there is going to be more details forthcoming. Second, I think there will be depending on what those details are, it's almost certainly going to be challenged in court. And also, practical reality is that people already have WeChat on their phones. You don't have to download them from the App Store if there are other ways to get it. So it's not going to result in the situation like in China. Technically, there's no way to achieve that level. If I may, though, I'd like to
Times, we're right at the end of the show, so I'm going to leave you with that thought, and you have the last word. Times, Yachu, Kinling, thank you so much for talking about the upcoming WeChat ban in the United States, if it is in fact a ban. Appreciate your time. Thanks, YouTubers. See you next time on the stream.